So again, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, Brad McDonald from Continuum Ag. And yeah, we'll go right into it. So yeah, so easy way to think of my name is Brad McDonald had a farm. I'm a fifth generation farmer from God's country, Ryan, Iowa. It's about 20 miles away from the Field of Dreams. If you guys are used to the famous movie, it's just in northeast Iowa over there. So originally is just a pig farm. I had enough land to feed the pigs essentially, and then I started farming my own ground in 2019. So great to be joining the legacy of the McDonald farm. And my dad and my brother are running the hog operation as well. And yeah, just great to be part of that. And certainly that's you'll hear a lot of that in my presentation is really coming at it from a farmer's perspective, because that's really what we focus on at Continuum Ag is we're a company for farmers by farmers. The founder and CEO, Mitchell Hora, seventh generation farmer from Southeast Iowa as well. So we understand that there's a lot of players in this and that we all have to be working together to achieve these really great potential and great aspirations when it comes to increasing everyone's profitability in the value chain. But farmers need to be a part of it. And we want to make sure that we are standing up for the farmers and making sure that they're getting compensated for all the hard effort and work that they're putting into it. So that's kind of where we're coming from at as a company from Continuum Ag. So the title of my presentation is "What is carbon intensity and why should farmers care?" I'm not sure what the education level on carbon intensity is of this group, but I feel like we've been trying to talk about carbon intensity for over a year and a half, closer to 2 years at this point. Talking about the potential. And as we get closer and closer to this January of 2025 timeline, people are picking up steam as far as understanding what that is. So pardon me if this is elementary for a lot of you on the call. A lot of this is going to be stuff that we've been talking about for a long time, but certainly there's a lot of people out there that have no idea what carbon intensity is. So we want to make sure that we're including that. And then hopefully we leave a lot of room at the end of it for questions and answers. So that way we can hit everyone as they have questions. So let's go ahead here. So let's start off with the very basics. Carbon intensity definition. Essentially, think of it synonymous with a carbon footprint. If you think of everything that's made, it has a carbon footprint. Ourselves, we all have a carbon footprint. Essentially, it is how much emissions are going up in the atmosphere, greenhouse gases per product that you're making. So if you think of from a farmer's perspective, easiest way to think of it is what's a corn CI is 29.1. That comes from the GREEP model. That's the standard score that they have from where the lab is in Champaign, Illinois. So every single county, every single draw area is going to have their own standard score. So we use 29.1 just as a fill-in, a standard CI score, because that's where what the standard score is for the GREEP lab that comes up with the model. So think of it that way as far as 29.1 is almost just a placeholder. But the easy way to think of CI in general is 0 is carbon neutral. So anything above 0, you're emitting more greenhouse gases for the product that you're producing than you're sequestering. It is possible to have a negative CI score, which means that you're sequestering more greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere for every bushel that you're producing. So 29.1 is the standard score. It's possible to be 0, and we'll go into all the practices that lead to that. So why is this important and why should farmers care? It became important with the Inflation Reduction Act. So love it, hate it, indifferent, whether where your stance is for the Inflation Reduction Act, it really doesn't matter when it comes to, we should all understand what the impact is for farmers. So in the Inflation Reduction Act, it was passed in August of 2022. And what it does is it allows biofuel companies or renewable fuel companies to earn tax credits if they lower their carbon intensity score below 50. So think of each biofuel company is going to have their own score. And one of the major contributing factors for what their score is for the gallons that they're producing, so a gallon of ethanol is going to have a carbon intensity score. A big factor of what that carbon intensity score is what the product that they're buying to make the fuel. So in this case, corn making ethanol, corn making up 29.1 is contributing to that 50 score. So what the law has said is for any biofuel company that's able to get below 50, they can earn tax credits. And so what that means is there has to be a major accounting involved of actually understanding what is the biofuel score and prove that to the IRS in order to earn those tax credits. A key timeline here is it starts for any biofuel every gallon produced after January 1, 2025. So what that means for a farmer is that the 2024 crop that we produce is going to be the first eligible crop feeding into the 2025 timeline. So essentially everything that's growing out there right now, that's what's going to be going into and impacting the biofuels CI scores come 2025. So it's right upon us. When we first started talking about this, it was we had a lot more time and could talk about all the practices that could impact 2024 CI scores. Now, not so much, but at least I'm talking to a crew here that it seems like you guys would be on the path of doing the practices that have a lower CI score. So there's still a lot of potential for farmers out there like yourselves to get your crop certified and at least look at getting some potential premiums on your crop. So let's look at how can a biofuel manufacturer actually earn their credits. There's 3 ways that they can lower their score to earn these credits. One is scope 1. They call it scope 1. It's through the pipeline. It's basically taking what should be emitting into the atmosphere from their own plants and putting it underground. If they're able to do that, that automatically would lower their score and to the tune of about 30 points. So just for some context, the biofuel companies that we're talking to, a lot of them are trying to figure out and gauge what their own scores are. And they range anywhere. We've been hearing some that are just below 50 already, all the way up to 60, 65. I would say the average is closer to 55 to 60. And so they have a little bit to go yet to even get in the money to be below that 50. And one quick and easy way to get there is through the pipeline. So there's a lot of politics around it, obviously. At Continuum, we're staying out of the politics, to be quite frank. All we're talking about is that if this happens, this is the opportunity. So if the pipelines come through, that's potential for the ethanol plants to lower their CI scores automatically. If they don't come through, that also means that they're going to be relying on the farmers to help them lower their scores as well. So that's just one key way that they can lower their scores. The other one is through investment into renewable energy. So the energy used to power the plants, that's scope 2. And they can do that by tapping into wind and solar. That overall has a pretty minimal impact. Talking to a lot of plants, they're looking at making this investment, and we're talking tens of millions of dollars to really revamp how some of these older plants are being made to maybe move the needle 10 points. So it's a high investment, low needle mover type of solution, but it's still possible and certainly something that a lot of these plants are looking into. Scope 3 is what we're going to be talking and focusing on, is buying a CI certified crop. So it comes down to every single bushel produced is going to have a CI score associated with it that's going into the biofuel manufacturer. So then the question is it going to be a certified score that's the actual score, or is it just going to be the standard score that's going to be assigned to it? If we as farmers take the initiative to certify our own crops, then we can prove to them saying, hey, my score isn't that 29.1 that you're using for a standard score. It's actually a 10, or it's actually a 15, or maybe it's a 0, or even negative. If you're able to do that, then that's helping those ethanol plants or biofuel manufacturers lower their score, and therefore should be earning tax credits and should reward the farmer accordingly based on what the value that the farmer is providing in the form of lowering their score. So that's kind of the three mechanisms. How the math works out is for every CI point under 50, that is 2 cents per gallon produced. So what does that look like as far as just kind of looking at it from a chart perspective? Let's say you're starting at 50, you're not in the money until you're at 50. So anything above 50, it's zero, flat line, zero earned. So the way to read this graph is as you're getting closer to zero, the tax credits go up, and they do cap it at zero. So in the law, they're saying if you are able to get to carbon neutral, you can earn up to $1 per gallon that you're producing in tax credits. Now, obviously, if a biofuel manufacturer is able to do that, and you're producing tens of millions of gallons, which most of these are, most of the manufacturers are in that tens of millions of range, they're earning massive tax credits here, even to the point where it's overflowing on what their tax liability is. So think of it, I just bring it down to home. This is an opportunity for an ethanol plant not to pay any taxes if they are able to lower their score enough. But then on top of that, for every credit that they're generating, they can resell those tax credits to buyers in that market. And right now the market's anywhere from 90 to 95 cents on the dollar. So imagine being able to completely eliminate your tax liability and then also being able to tax credits and sell that to the open market. That's the kind of opportunity that we're talking about here. There's 23 billion gallons of ethanol, or biofuel, I should say, produced in the U.S. So, I mean, theoretically, if you were able to get to zero, if every single gallon produced, we're talking about a massive, massive opportunity, a needle mover here. And I put over here as far as the reduction options, just to remind everyone as far as the pipeline. So if you're sitting at 50 today, most of them are around 55, but if you're at 50, pipeline automatically gets you down to 20. The energy efficiencies, maybe you get another 10. But the on-farm portion is really a huge needle mover that I think a lot of people are either not understanding or don't believe that it would be real. But the on-farm potential can be massive as far as moving the needle. So really what it comes down to is the pipeline is definitely in play. It looks like with the recent movements there, that is going to happen, but it's not a short-term fix. So really the needle movers that they can do at the moment is look at energy efficiencies, but then really the crux of it is going to be on the on-farm. How can I buy grain that has a low enough CI score for me to lower my own footprint to be in the money? That's really where the opportunity lies. So let's take the math a step further into farmer language here. So what does that mean for a bushel of corn? Well, approximately you get 2.7 gallons of ethanol per bushel of corn. That's a very conservative number. That's probably one of the older plants that we're looking at, just to be conservative. A lot of these efficiencies are closer to 3. So just to be conservative with it, using the 2.7, that would mean for 2.7 gallons times that 2 cents per CI point would equivalent to 5.4 cents per bushel per CI point under 29.1. So that's at Continuum Ag. When we're looking at the value, the potential value created, that's the math. We talk about 5.4 cents being a conservative number per bushel per CI point. That is the total opportunity for the ethanol plant to capitalize on in the form of tax credits. Now, that doesn't, I'll add the caveat, and I'll say it multiple times throughout the presentation. That does not mean it's 5.4 cents per bushel in the farmer's pocket. That is the total value created in the form of tax credits to the ethanol plant if they are under 50. So as long as they hit 50 and lower, that's the value that can be created. So just keep that in mind. I don't want the key takeaway from this presentation to say, well, this Brad McDonald guy said that I would earn 5.4 cents per bushel per CI point. That is not the case. That is the total value to the industry. And so how that pie is split up still has to be determined. But we do want to make sure that that's crystal clear from the get-go. So just take the example of carbon neutral. So if 29.1 is the standard score and you're able to get to zero, that's worth $1.57 per bushel. And again, that's the math is the 29.1 times the 5.4 cents. That again, the key takeaway is not that, oh, Brad McDonald said that I could get $1.57 a bushel if I have carbon neutral corn. No, that's the total value to the industry. So just make sure that that's crystal clear there. But let's run through an example, just run through hypotheticals. So let's look at a 1,500 acre guy, 200 APH, assuming this is the key assumption, a 50% revenue share to the farmer. So assuming that we have absolutely no idea what that's actually going to be, but just for an example purpose, we're going to throw a number in there saying 50% of the value goes to the farmer, the other 50% goes to cost and to the ethanol plant. Let's say I've got a score of 16.6. That would equate to about 12.4 or 5 cents, or CI points rather, below the 29.1 times that 5.4 cents. So the total value that this farmer is creating with a score of 16.6 is around 67 cents per bushel to the ethanol industry. So if you look at a 50% revenue share, that would mean 33 cents or close to 34 cents per bushel to the farmer. So it's not nothing, especially in these down times with corn prices. A 34-cent boost is quite significant. So for this farmer, when you look at the number of acres, the 1,500 corn acres and the 200 APH, that's over $100,000. If you're looking at, so I mean, this is a very realistic situation. A 1,500 acre guy, 200 APH with a score of 16.6, that's an added value of over $100,000 in their pocket. So I cannot emphasize this enough. There's never been a program out there that has the potential that this does as far as value for the industry and certainly for the farmer. So really, like, these are very realistic possible situations. And it's a huge needle mover. There's never been so much money dedicated to this space, to the agriculture space, for moving the needle when it comes to lowering CI scores. So it is a massive opportunity, and I think it's important for farmers to understand that the potential is out there with all of these unknowns and caveats. The key one being, what's the actual revenue share to the farmer? All right, so I'm going to put my farmer hat on for a little bit here and just kind of look through the history of my own farm, just to kind of put some rubber to the road here to understand what this would actually mean. So when I started farming my own ground, I've been a farmer my whole life, but in 2019, I bought my own farm, and I was a conventional farmer. And so I was doing full till, plow, VT, and all the things as far as no cover crop. In fact, here's all of the practices here in a nutshell. So 180 units of anhydrous, typical chemical, and ended up with a 201 bushel yield. This was in 2019. My score, plugging in these practices into the GREET model, is a 25. So if in my county the standard score was 29 and I would sell to the ethanol industry, even doing conventional practices, I still possibly could have been in the money to the tune of creating 22 cents a bushel or $44 per acre to the equivalent to the ethanol industry. So yeah, I think it's really important, and maybe this isn't the appropriate people to be talking to, because I'm certain that most of you are not doing the conventional practices over here. But when I'm talking to my conventional guys too, you should still understand what your score is, because you might be surprised. It could come back that your score could still be in the money. And so it just so happened, me being conventional everything in 2019, my score was still worth something, even without changing any of my practices to regen or sustainability. Now, that said, there is that potential to lower my score, and there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I'll hit on the key things here. Is cover crops, number one needle mover. If you're putting on a cover crop, that does account for in the model saying that that's a sequestration event. Therefore, you're taking greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere and putting it into the ground. No till, obviously, if you're reducing your till, that's another category that they say. can help reduce it, but no-till also helps without releasing the gases from the ground. Reduce fertilizer and chemical, meaning if you're able to produce more with less, right? So it's not looking at reduced from last year to this year. There is no, we'll go into that a little bit as well. There's no comparison to history at all when it comes to fertilizer or anything actually. But if you are able to produce more with less, that does help your CI score. And in that same vein, applying manure. And so the reason why manure is such a big needle mover is you're able to reduce your synthetic fertilizer, and also there's no carbon intensity associated with manure in the model because it's a byproduct of the animal. So any carbon emissions that would be applied to those practices for raising an animal, it's tied actually to the animal itself. It would not be applied to the manure. So therefore it's a free pass. It is basically you're not actually dinged at all for having a higher CI if you are applying manure. So it's a double whammy here. Manure actually, it doesn't have a score associated with it, and it's reducing that fertilizer need as well. So, and then the one thing that we love to focus on here is increasing yields. You can't just throw yield out the window when it comes to this. You have to still maintain yields or ideally increase yields when going to these practices. And that's the beauty of what we do at Continuum Ag is we try and help farmers actually navigate how to do that. That's one of the key focuses that the company was started on, was trying to help farmers implement these practices without hurting yield. And so how it works is the model, it takes the total carbon footprint of your operation and then it divides it by the production. That's how it gets it into a per bushel basis. So that's the key thing. If you're dividing by a bigger number, you're just going to be lowering that score if you have a positive CI. Now, if you have a negative CI, it actually works opposite, where you as you increase your yield, you actually are getting closer to zero. But for all intents and purposes, thinking of increasing your yield, you are going to be lowering your CI score. So it's a key thing to focus on going forward. So let's look at the farmer example again in 2022. I started putting in my own regen practices in for my 2022 crop. And what I ended up doing was I put in a cover crop, just simple cereal rye broadcast application in the fall. I did go to a no-till system, switched from my anhydrous to fill in the gaps from anhydrous to 32%. Still had my same chemical usage, but I did put on hog manure. So I put on a hefty dose of hog manure from the McDonald farm, and ended up having great weather that year and had a robust yield as well. So 259 bushel yield. I would not attribute that necessarily to any of the sustainable practices, especially in the first year, but this 259 was comparable to all of the other yields in the operation that we had in traditional conventional practices. So my dad and brother that year wouldn't have been doing the regen practices, and we ended up about the same type of yield. So the regen practices did not hurt my operation, at least. But the key thing to focus on is what does that do to my CI score? I was able to score a negative 4.3 in the model just based on that. And so again, since the model only looks at what happens in that year, it doesn't care about what I've done in the past. It would look at, if I were to score my 2022 crop, it was a negative 4.3 based on these practices alone. That equates to $1.80 per bushel, or in this case, $467 per acre. Again, total value to the industry, but that's massive. If I were to, I don't even need to get 50% of this in order to be a massive needle mover for my operation. So for any of you guys that are in this type of environment on your own farms, I think it'd be absolutely critical for you to at least understand what your score is, to just understand what the value can be, particularly the guys that are able to sell directly to the ethanol plants. So just a good example as far as what can be possible. and it can be lightning fast. If you've been conventional your whole life and you want to try out putting on a cover crop, that can immediately impact your score. It's not a gradual thing. I don't get extra credit for doing the practices for 20 years. But then the corollary is the same, where the guys who have been doing it for 20 years, so many of these old carbon programs, you were excluded from because they needed what's called additionality. You had to show your change from what I did last year to this year. That's not the case with carbon intensity. Again, it's only looking at this year's case, and year by year, it doesn't compare any backdates. So that's so crucial for the guys who have been doing it forever. Now you get to participate. Now you're eligible, because what we'll do is we'll just plug in what did you do this year, and it's going to show what score you have. So pretty amazing as far as the potential here. Again, I can't emphasize enough as far as the potential is just so massive, especially in this type of environment. So really, this just kind of highlights as far as what that looks like. So before conventional practices, my score of a 25 to a negative 4.3, going still in the money, $44 per acre to 467 total value to the industry. Pretty impactful stuff. All right, so what to expect as far as certification, because this has not existed before. Really, Continuum Ag, we've been kind of the thought leader as far as how can we provide the easy button for a farmer to participate in this. And because otherwise a farmer would have to rely on either signing up on the dotted line for some program that they're signing up for, which includes they're just going to take whatever money is offered to them in that package, or they could try to certify their own crop themselves. That would include them going to a third-party verifier and trying to navigate the waters that largely have not been written yet. A lot of the rules from the IRS, they haven't even come out with it, but we're on top of it at Continuum Ag, and this is the process that we have for a farmer to participate. And the first thing to do would be looking at what your score is. So we've created a software, and it's housed in topsoil.ag, where you can create a free profile at no cost, obviously, just by gauging what's your general practices. So we take a survey that's just asking, on average, do you do a cover crop? On average, what does your cover crop termination look like? On average, what's your tillage program? Are you no-till? Are you reduced till? On average, what's your fertilizer inputs? On average, what's your chemical? And that will feed into the GREET model. It's not our own model. It's the official model developed by the Department of Energy. And at the end of the day, we believe that's the model that's going to be adopted by the IRS as the gauge for what farmers are going to get paid on and what the tax credits are going to be issued to the ethanol plants. So from that survey, you can unlock your score just to understand where you're at, just to gauge, are you that 25 like I was in 2019, or are you that negative 4.3 like I was in 2022? From there, a farmer would have the option to actually sign up to get certified. So really, at this point, just seeing your score, that doesn't do anything. It's just gauging where you're at. You have to actually go through the process of certification in order for it to be worth anything. And to me, that I think is where the rubber hits the road, as far as that's where we're going to get in the nitty-gritty details of understanding what are the practices that actually occurred on your farm on field level. I liken it to doing organics. It's not enough for me to be an organic farmer just by doing the practices. I have to actually be proactive to have someone come and approve my practices on the farm level and get the stamp of organic certification on my product. That's what's going to have to happen here. It's not enough for me just to run through topsoil and see, oh, I've got a negative 4.3 score. They should pay me something. No, you actually have to go through the process of certifying your crop, so that way it's absolutely official and going to be accepted by the IRS. So once you sign up for that certification, it is $7 per acre to sign up with Continuum Ag to go through all this, and then you would be assigned a Regen Success agronomist to basically do exactly all the documentation needed. The last piece of information that you would be signing up is your yield, and you would, at the end of it, just like you would a government program or any insurance, you would have to sign your name saying this is true and accurate data. You're attesting by signing, yep, all the information I provided to Continuum is true and accurate. Then we go to the third party verifier that's going to get that stamp of certified on your product. And from there, that's when you would be able to truly test the market, see what your product is worth, and see, compare. Okay, hey, I've got a score of 0. What's this ethanol plant willing to pay versus this ethanol plant? So you're not signing up specifically for a program. We're not offering a program. We're offering certification. So then the farmer can participate. Now, I will say we are providing a marketplace for the certified bushels as well. And what that looks like is we're going to know what the scores are in certain areas. And therefore, we're going to be working with those ethanol plants. We already have signed agreements with multiple ethanol plants to say, hey, we want to work with you to try and get you certified bushels. And then eventually it's going to come to what's the ethanol plant going to be willing to pay for those scores. And so that marketplace is going to be launched here this fall. So pretty exciting movement here at Continuum Ag as well. I know that we're already going pretty quick here, but have kind of just the spiel as far as what that looks like. For you guys, you can go ahead and create a topsoil account and get a CI score. It's a $500 value. We've been offering it for $500, but you could get it for $25. And here's the process. You go to topsoil.ag. You would go ahead and click on new customer, fill in just general information, just like you would for any account that you're typically signing up for. You would then fill out your farm profile. So you select, you can see here what the CI offering is basically for corn and soybeans. We do offer it for soybeans as well. I know that we focused on corn for this presentation, but soybeans going into biodiesel, you can certify both soybeans as well. Go ahead and click through this, and basically it's a survey questionnaire. This is where you'd be going through, okay, I don't actually plant a cover crop, or I do. You would actually hit the plus button and you would fill out the general information. We ask general questions of what kind of species are you planting, when are you planting it, how much are you planting. For termination, like are you roller crimping, are you burning it down, whatever that looks like. And you go through those general information, and then at the end of it, you would be able to unlock your score. So it takes you to this dashboard here. You'd click on farm profile, fill that out, and then you click on unlock your score. And then you can use this code BBC95. We have what's called the Billion Bushel Challenge. And if you put in that code, you'd be able to get it for $25 to just see your score. So it's a pretty simple, harmless exercise. If you just want to see your corn score, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to fill out that survey and hit purchase. And that's going to show you where you're at. So it's a very low barrier to just understand where you're at. From there, what's beautiful about the software is now we also provide for that $25 a scenario tool. So if you are starting at a 24.8 and you've never done cover crop before, in this scenario, okay, let's turn on cover crop, let's do reduced till, let's change some of these metrics to see what it does to my score. And so you'd hit recalculate, and you can see as you're planning to go into your 2025 crop, what if I do things differently? What does that do to my score? And then the most important is, what's that do to the value? So I know this is a little bit blurry. Hopefully you guys can see it on the screen. In this case, I was going from $51 per acre to $236 per acre by clicking on, I believe in this situation, going into cover crop and reduced till, as opposed to no cover crop and conventional till in this case. So it's kind of a nifty tool. And again, it's all tied back to the GREET model. So now what, basically you guys can reach out to me and we have an email here as far as sales@continuum.ag. You can create your own account and go through those steps as well. We also have a CI chit chat, or we have weekly webinars to talk about carbon intensity. And you can see that pretty easily. You can either go to continuum.ag CI chit chat, or if you create a topsoil account, we'll also be reaching out to you as well to just get you through as far as to understand what your his score might be, and then let you know of any of the updated news and information. We have a little bit of time, not much. I'm going to go through some FAQs. As I go through it, you can go ahead and scan this. And if you have questions of your own, you can just use that as far as to be registered on a list that will reach back to you. Also, I'll leave a little bit of time at the end to go through it. Is this another carbon program? Absolutely not. The benefits of this, again, no long-term commitments. So you're not actually signing up for a program at all. You're just certifying your grain. It's like you're selling a brand new product. You're not selling conventional grain anymore. You're selling organic grain, right? That's the scenario. You're not just providing a conventional grain. Now you're providing a CI certified grain. So think of it very similar to organic. It's not a carbon program where you're signing up for a multi-year commitment. I've got to change practices, and ultimately most carbon programs, minimal payment. I signed up for a carbon program myself, ended up getting paid $25 per acre. Compared to the opportunities with CI certification, it doesn't even compare. Can I participate if I've been doing these practices before? I've answered that during the presentation. Absolutely. All of the guys doing this forever. I assume that there's a lot of them on this call. Yes, you can be doing these practices forever and still participate. Can I participate if I'm already in a carbon program? Likely no. And in fact, I would be closer to just saying no, because there have been rules coming out from the IRS, not with CI certification, but for SAF or sustainable aviation fuel, that just straight up said, no, you are not going to be able to participate in a carbon program and CI certification. And the crux of it is they don't want double counting for the credits that's generated. So if you think of it, if you're participating in a carbon credit program, the end result is you are selling a grain and carbon credits. So if you sign up for a program, the program is actually paying you for the carbon credits, not the grain. Now you're kind of meshing the two, and you're selling it together. But once you sell the carbon credits, you don't have the ability to mesh the two in order to sell a CI certified grain. So that's the example I like to give. Can I participate if I'm already in a state cost share or an EQIP program? I'll expand this out to even say any program that's paying for the practice changes, not generating carbon credits. Likely, yes, you would be able to participate in an EQIP or state cost share. The key thing that a farmer needs to understand, if you don't know whether you're in a carbon program or if you're in a cost share program, just read the contracts that you sign to see if they're generating carbon credits. That's going to be the key differentiator. If you're generating carbon credits, you are probably not going to be able to participate in CI certification. If you are not generating carbon credits, which EQIP, you're not. They're EQIP or state cost share is basically subsidizing you to go out and do the practices themselves. They are not purchasing carbon credits at the end of the year from those practices. If that's the case, if there's no carbon credits generated, likely you would be able to participate in CI certification. Is there a multi-year commitment? No. It's looking at this year and this year alone. We do have it if you sign up for CI certification that it is a subscription based, but you can cancel at any time. So you're automatically enrolled to be ready for the next year because again, it's a year by year thing. So the $7 per acre is looking only at your 2024 crop. You would be paying a $7 per acre for your 2025 crop and on if you're, as long as you're getting those premiums, right? You want to be able to make sure that it's worth the investment. Otherwise you can always say, you know what, I didn't receive a premium, so you can unsubscribe at any time. Are other crops besides corn be able to participate? Yes, we're accepting certification for soybeans, and the ideal candidates there, if you know that your soybeans, when crushed, the oil's going into soy biodiesel, renewable biodiesel, that would be the best candidates for that. How is the CI score calculated? It is through the GREEP model. Again, I mentioned this as far as it comes through the Department of Energy. It is not us that's driving this. We did not make this model. We are adopting that in our software and just playing scenarios based on the model itself. And the model itself is updated once every year or so. I do anticipate there's going to be another update before all this comes to fruition for 2025, but it would be based on the CI score from the GREET model, not us. Do you have to deliver to an ethanol plant to participate? That's going to be a question that we're going to have to work with our friends at the elevators with. So we've talked to a lot of elevators saying, hey, the potential is massive here. We want to be part of it. We source a lot of our grain to an ethanol plant. What can we do? And so there is definitely that potential. I would just say, just be open and honest with your elevator about what their intentions are. Are they wanting to play in this space? Have they heard about this space? And the same goes also for your ethanol plant. We've talked to over 120 ethanol plants to date. They all know that they're going to have to be participating. I don't think anyone wants to sit on the sidelines and do nothing while their competitor has the potential to completely eliminate their tax liabilities. So, but then again, there's also massive hoops that they anticipate they're going to have to go through. So the uncertainty there is certainly there. But we just encourage you to work with your both elevator and ethanol plant to understand where they're at. And then, yeah, how do you find out? Just start working with them and ask, and also contact us. If you aren't sure and you're not sure who to talk to, we have a pretty good gauge on who's doing what, and happy to disclose that as well. Going back to the pipeline, does it make the grain CI obsolete? If you remember back to that chart, if you're at 50 or 55 even, the pipeline only moves you 30 points. So if I'm a farmer and you're working with an ethanol plant that's looking to tap into that doesn't mean that your low carbon grain is worth nothing. It would actually kind of be blessing in a lot of cases. If they are, let's say you're a 60 ethanol plant, a score of a 60, that 30 points is only going to get you so far in the money. But that would encourage them to actually participate. If they are able to tap into a pipeline, now it's easier for them to get below 50. So you can make the case both ways. That's why we don't take a stance on pipeline as far as what that means to the farmer. But at the end of the day, it absolutely does not mean the farmer is obsolete if they tap into a pipeline. And then the all-important question is, was the farmer's cut? And that is truly an unknown that I will not be able to speak to at this point. I will say this here as far as the risks. If you certify, I think that there is definitely risks that the government changes the law. A lot of people are saying, well, what if Trump gets elected? Does all this just go away? So far, this has had bipartisan support. So sitting in Iowa, we have Republican senators, and both of them have been openly an advocate for this 45Z tax credit. And so at the end of the day, we don't believe, whether it's red or blue, it's going to be here, we believe, for the long haul, at least the way the law is written, for the next 3 years. And if anything, we believe that it's just going to be a continuation. What if my ethanol plant doesn't participate? Certainly that is a risk. But again, they would be leaving a lot on the table if that were to be the case, so especially in the long term. What if your score is too high to collect a premium? Yeah, that's a true risk. If I'm sitting there in 2019 and my score was 25, and let's say the standard score in my county was 20, I would have been too high, and my corn would not have been worth a premium. So certainly that is a risk. The worst case is you're out the $7 per acre certification fee. So again, I think of it as you pay a lot for certain things such as hedging or crop insurance, and in some cases, especially with crop insurance, you're hoping you don't even collect on that because you had such a good year. The worst case here is that you'd be out the certification fee. But I think it's important to look at the flip side as well. If you don't certify, you lose that upside potential premium. Your neighbor could be taking advantage of it while you're sitting on the sideline. And then price, actually, we already are past the early booking fee, so I need to change that. It's the $7. We're in mid-season right now. So as harvest approaches, I will say it most likely is not going to be $7 because it's going to be a rush job. So the process that I showed before, as far as collecting the data, the longer you wait to sign up, it costs us more to be able to really try and do a rush job and get all of that data, to be able, lots of long hours, lots of people having to do it. And so our costs to certify it go up as we get closer to that harvest time. So certainly we anticipate that we're going to have another increase in price here as we get closer to harvest. And again, I already hit on it, but think of how much you spend on seed, insurance, hedging, all without guarantee of a potential ROI. Certainly, no doubt, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There is a risk if you certify, but there's also a risk if you don't certify. So that's up to each one's individual appetite for risk here. But the key takeaway here is in 2024, all bushels going into ethanol is going to have a CI score, whether you want to or not. It's either going to have the standard scores just assigned to it, or you can have a certified crop that's going to have a potential for a premium. So to me, that's up to each farmer's individual choice. But I don't know of any other game out there where you can put $7 down and get the kind of returns that we're talking about when it comes to the potential for the CI certification. And I'll leave you here with this, as far as it is a quote from Tom Vilsack, Secretary of Ag. Farmers need to understand the significance of this. I want you all to understand it's a critical moment, a make or break moment. If it's not seized and not taken full advantage of, you may have a different conversation years from now. Don't miss this opportunity. And to me, politics aside, that's spot on. I don't want to be sitting with my dad, my brother, 5 years from now saying, gosh, darn it, we should have certified starting in 2024 and taken advantage of it. I just think that you got to look at the big picture and truly put things into perspective from a risk, a reward opportunity. And so I think that I can't put it any better than that. So happy to take more questions here. I know we're just about time, but yeah, I'll leave the QR code as well. Feel free to reach out and sign up for our newsletter, all that good stuff. So I'll continue to share. I cannot see the screen, Teresa, but I'll let you
for the questions.
Yeah, if there are any.
Yeah, there are a couple that came in. And again, just thank you, Brad. It's great to get an update on what's happening in this space. Albert Lea is actually kind of a unique company. We sell to organic farmers, conventional farmers, really diversified farms. And while this may not affect every one of our customers, because not every one of our customers is selling corn to ethanol plants, I think it's important for us all to understand what's happening in this space. Because one thing that I think of a lot is if all row crop farmers get on board with planting cover crops, which would be great, how do you think that's going to impact things like cover crop seed supply this fall or in the future?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It all plays together. Yeah, it's better to be educated than not, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the questions that came in was, do you guys do measurements of actual carbon sequestration at Continuum Ag?
So we offer soil sampling services that would tie to that. And that was actually one of the big things that was part of the carbon credit programs in the past. They wanted to show that it was actually moving the needle in the soil. And so we were doing the carbon density and all the different types of soil testing that was appropriate for that, or whatever the protocol was needed for that. But the beauty of this CI certification is, as of right now, there's nothing needed for sticking a probe in the ground. And so we are able to just look at the practices themselves and have that run through the GREEP model for the score, and that's enough. We don't need to actually go out there, and which is just a phenomenal thing as far as for the farmer at least. It's one less thing that they have to worry about to prove. Now, they're going to have to prove the practices occurred. You're going to, if you said you put out a cover crop, it's not just going to be enough if you're audited to say that. What the process is you sign that this is true and accurate data, but all of it's subject to audit. And therefore, we try and collect all the data as we go. We look at the as applied maps, try and submit as much as we possibly can. Receipts, I even take pictures and videos when I'm doing certain practices. And you just want more and more proof that you possibly can to prove that if you said you put out a cover crop, what information can you provide to prove that happened? That's really where the proof is, not necessarily actually testing soil itself.
Can you store your photos and videos in the topsoil software?
Yep. So we have that capability, and that would all be working with our Regen Success agronomist.
Sure.
So Regen Success agronomist walks through it. The first step is going to be field boundaries. So if you have the beauty of it is a lot of farmers already have a lot of this stuff either in JD Ops or Climate Field View, wherever that is. We're going to have the direct connectivity with those. We can also just download straight from it the shape files. So the step number 1, get your field boundaries. Then we start to look at where the practices that occurred on each field as they occur. So right now, obviously, it's spraying season. A lot of our guys are submitting all of the information with that. Ideally, we've already got all the cover crop and everything in. But yeah, if you're signing up today, it's not too late, obviously. It's not the $5 that it was, but it's $7 now. And yeah, we at least will be taking the information as the week comes. And yeah, we'd be able to store all of that associated with your profile.
There was another question that came in. It says, Brad, are renewable fuels the only market for farmers looking to capitalize on their CI score?
Yeah, great question. And by law, yes, it would be the only industry right now. That said, that's where we believe everything is moving. I'm a hog guy, right? So think of from my perspective, it would be so much easier for me if I just could feed the corn, my low CI corn, to the pigs, and then just sell a pig that's a low CI pig and get a premium on that. That would be the ideal situation. We're not there yet as an industry. But I do believe, and us at Continuum believe that it's going to be very similar to organic. Eventually, you're going to see a low CI pork chop in the grocery stores, just like you see an organic pork chop in the grocery stores, depending on which grocery store you're going to. So I do believe that's where, and we talk to the animal guys all the time as far as, gosh, how can we participate? And the answer I like to give is really, I think ethanol was first to the trough because they have the best lobbyists. They were able to figure out how do we actually get this in the Inflation Reduction Act, and they were able to do it. Now the other guys are going to have to try and figure out how do we navigate these waters, because now the hog guy, I'm going to have to compete for buying that grain, right? And so how can I compete with the ethanol plant that's basically getting subsidized in the form of tax credits to buy a higher price corn? Now that's great for the corn guys, tough for the animal guys. But either through their own future legislation to try and get their own tax credits, but most likely it's going to be, how do I get a product out there that's a low CI product and get a premium on that, so then I can capture a premium on my products so I can afford to compete for the corn to feed my animals. So as of right now, ethanol, but we firmly believe that the future is going to be the industry will catch up.
I have a question for you. What
Please.
if the IRS never releases guidance or like firm rules on this and it passes? Because you have 3 years, right? 25, 26, 27. But
That's right.
sometimes the government just doesn't get things done. And there's
Yep.
like, how do you answer that? It's maybe a tough question for you, Brad,
No.
but what if it doesn't, the rules never come out from the IRS?
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, again, I'm not one to sugarcoat it. That's a risk, right? It's possible that the government just does not get their stuff together. Now, that said, it's their own law, right? So like
Right.
they're going to have to adhere to their own law somehow, some way. But yeah, what if it just doesn't happen for a long time? And theoretically, the worst case scenario is if I'm theoretically taking tax credits in 2025. Well, I'm filing for my 2025 fiscal year, April 15th of 2026. So theoretically, the IRS has until April of 2026 to come out with rules and guidelines. And we're already going to be in Q1, Q2 of 2026 before we're able to really understand what that means. Dang near half the period that you just mentioned is over at that point,
Right.
And so, I mean, that is a possibility. But again, I would rather be on the side of prepared than not. So let's run that scenario through the logical conclusion. there would be retroactive tax credits given. If I'm an ethanol plant, the IRS doesn't come out until April of 2026, I'm still going to apply for those tax credits. I'm not just going to let it go to waste. And then if I do get a premium paid out to me in the form of tax credits, then that's when the farmer would be able to say, hey, you got benefit from it. Where's my cut? Like, where does that go? So it could be a delayed payment to the farmer, significantly delayed payment to the farmer. But again, the risk is the $7, right? So
Right.
yeah, you put your $5 or $7 down now, you might not get paid until spring of 2026. Now, if you were to put my realistic hat on, what I think is actually going to happen is the IRS is going to have to figure out what this looks like before Jan 1, 2025. And all roads have indicated that that's the case. So for example, the IRS did come out with new guidelines of how do ethanol plants actually sign up for this. They put out rules on their own saying, hey, ethanol plant, if you want to be first in line come January 1, 2025, you have to sign up by July 15th. So right around the corner, right? They came out with those rules and guidelines just last month. So in terms of like the government moving, it's almost unheard of where they put out a statement saying, hey, you have to sign up for this and you only have a month to do it. Normally it's a much more prolonged process. So in terms of government speed, they're moving lightning fast. All signs indicate to that. So I think it's going to be longer than we hope, but not the doomsday long that we all fear. So somewhere in the middle there is my best guess, but we'll have to see what happens.
Well, do you have any idea of how like irrigation affects the score? There's a question that says pivot versus underground credit.
Yeah.
I have underground pivot.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm not an irrigation guy, but we do have it in our survey. Whether they differentiate between the two. I know that they do ask irrigation, so we have it in our survey, and they ask how many inches have been applied throughout the growing season. I don't know if they actually say differentiate between pivot, underground, whatever that is. So I might have to look into that specifically, but they absolutely take irrigation in play.
Yeah, I have another question for you if you have time, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely.
I focus on cover crops a lot. One thing that baffles me is it seems like if you check the cover crop box, that drops your score, but with different species of cover crops, they can act very differently. Do you have any indications if they'll release more guidance on, like an overwintering winter rye? Will that have a higher impact on dropping your score than if you plant like a winter killed oat? Or are they all rated the same? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'll just speak to what the model is, and it's a check the box. So as of right now, we do ask the question. So we collect the data to understand what species are you putting on, how are you putting it on, when are you terminating it, how are you terminating it, how much are you putting on? All of those questions are in our due diligence. But when it comes to the GREET model itself, it just asks, did you put a cover crop on? And so that probably feels unfair to the guys that have been that are really far into this, that are doing the multi-species, flying it on early, and really having a big growth by the spring, and roller crimping and all that stuff. Obviously, those guys are doing more to sequester than the guys that are broadcasting it in December and doing a VT in early spring and killing it as fast as it germinates. Obviously there's a differentiation there scientifically, but as far as the model is concerned, they do treat them the same. Now I'll add the caveat that the final model has not been released. As far as we don't know for sure if the GREET's going to change that or if they're going to stick to what they're at, what it currently is. But as of right now, the question is cover crop, no cover crop.
In Minnesota, I recently attended a field day where they talked about winter camelina being a low carbon oilseed crop. Can your model factor that in at all for winter camelina that would be used for crushing for use in the sustainable aviation industry?
So Yep. So, I mean, as far as for cover crop purposes themselves, it's the same. So, and I want to be sure that it's crystal clear. It's
Oh,
not our
right,
model.
because
It's not our
camelina.
model, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're just following exactly what the model is that GREET has published. And so,
Okay.
now hopefully that's not taken poorly by anyone as far as I wish that the model was more robust for those guys. But I mean, on the flip side, it's also kind of a good gateway for people who are not
So to
necessarily. Yeah, go ahead.
clarify, if
Yeah.
you did grow winter camelina specifically for oilseed, to crush for oilseed, or
Yeah.
for the sustainable aviation fuel industry,
Yep.
the current model doesn't have that crop in it, does it?
No, I believe that it does.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't remember off the top of my head, but
I
we
didn't
are
see
only
it on
offering.
your list when you
Yep.
pulled
Okay.
it
So
up,
then that
but
would be, but just to clarify, we're only offering corn and soybeans at the time.
oh,
So
okay.
we're not offering, and that's where I would just want to make sure that that's crystal clear. We have not been not offered the winter camelina certification, and so even though that might be part of the model, and I believe it probably is. I would have to double check on exactly. I think there's 5 of them in there, but we are focusing solely on the corn and soybeans, not any of the oil seeds going into the SAF and biofuel besides
Okay.
soybeans.
Sounds good. I see the comment on irrigation to the grower said he has underground drip low volume for irrigation, but I'm assuming that's something he could plug into your free entry.
Yep,
If you go to topsoil, you could plug in some basic information to get a baseline
that's right. Yep, it'll
score.
show up in the inches applied. If it's a low drip, that's going to be obviously a lower impact than pivot irrigation. So yeah, that's how it's going to show up in our model. I do not think they differentiate, but again, not 100% remembering off the top of my head if they do differentiate in the model itself.
One last question for you. Has the ethanol industry or the folks you've worked with that in that industry with indicated what percentage they would share with the farmer?
Yeah, so we
Or
throw out the number 50%, and that has not had any pushbacks. Now, they also don't confirm. They don't say, and I will say one ethanol plant in particular went on record saying after cost, we'll pass 100% of the value on to farmers. So
oh,
like they're already saying publicly, hey, we want farmers to participate in this. Now they also throw in there they don't they have their own questions of whether or not the government's going to come out in time, and so it might be a false promise anyway, but they publicly said that if this happens, we of course are going to have costs associated with it. After those costs, 100% going to the farmers. So I think that the industry overall is waiting for the dust to settle, to understand exactly what this is going to mean for costs to participate, and to see what it makes sense for their business model as far as what percent cut they're going to make. That's why you're not going to hear anyone committing one like a dollar figure for sure, 100%. And when it comes to CI certification at this point, but we're at least testing the waters and have not had any pushback on the 50%.